Hey everyone, welcome to week 3 of Master Your Mind, a mental health moment. My name is Elizabeth McDowell and I'm an associate licensed counselor. And today I'm going to be talking to you a little bit about kids and emotions. So, how they express their emotions, how they manage their emotions, how we can help them as parents in doing all of that, and also how they differ than us as adults in expressing those emotions. And when we're talking about kids, we're talking about anywhere from the ages of 4 through 18, so through adolescence. So I'm going to be talking about just some general ideas that we can be thinking about in terms of kids through adolescence, but also some specifics as well um, to help the different age groups with the things that they're feeling and experiencing emotionally. And also at the end of the talk today, I'm going to have Pastor John Brown from Journey Church, who is our next generation pastor, who has just a ton of experience and wisdom when it comes to helping kids and teenagers through different emotional issues, and just has so much wisdom as a father as well. And it really just kind of want to encourage parents to do some perspective switching during this time, and just how we can be encouraged as parents during this time, and how we can intentionally connect with our children. So I am also a mom of 3 young children. So I have a 4-year-old, I have a 2.5-year-old, and I have an 8-month-old. My older 2 are boys, and my baby is a girl, my baby girl. So I'm speaking a little bit today, not only just from the perspective of a counselor, but also from the perspective of a mom. So going to share just some of those insights as well. Obviously, I'm a little new to the parenting game, but also in my counseling practice over the last several years, I would say I've probably worked the majority of that time with teenagers, with kids, mostly middle school and high school age, some young adults, some younger than that as well. So just kind of speaking from those perspectives as a therapist and also as a mom. So hope you're encouraged by what we talk about today, and especially by having Pastor John on later as well. So the first thing I want to talk about is the idea that kids often express mental health issues in different ways than we do, and really through physical issues. So this is not uncommon to hear about even in adults. A lot of times, actually, the way that adults who are struggling with mental health issues will first seek help for them is because of the physical ailments that are associated with them. And this is even more prevalent in kids who are struggling with mental health issues, because first of all, they don't have the cognitive ability to be able to express their emotions the way that we do as adults. So in helping adults in therapy, we usually just use talk therapy, which means we're talking about what's going on, what we're feeling, we're being mindful, we're thinking about things. So it's mostly just having a conversation. But with kids, they don't have the same ability to think and reflect and verbalize the things that they're feeling. So you have to get a little more creative in how you talk with them and how you work with them. And a huge way is by being aware of what they're experiencing physically. And sometimes that's a great tool to use, of even asking them about what physical things that they're feeling in connection to their emotions. So for example, kids who often struggle with anxiety will present with a lot of complaints about stomach issues or headaches. Kids with anger sometimes as well. Sadness can be headaches or sleeping issues or eating issues. So I would encourage you, if you're a parent or even a youth leader or a godparent or whatever role that it is that you play, the kids in your life, if all of a sudden they're presenting with kind of strange and abnormal physical issues that don't seem to be connected to anything else going on, any medical issues, any dietary changes, anything like that, it might be emotions. And so it's important to pay attention to those things and think about how they might connect to feelings or experiences, and using that as a tool to open up the conversation. Next thing I want to talk about is how kids are just very perceptive. They're more perceptive and intuitive than we think that they are, and they're affected by more than we expect that they are. That's really the best way that I can say it, but this is something that I continually see over and over when parents bring kids into my office, where they're talking about things that the family has been through, recent changes, or anything that they're experiencing. And they'll kind of go, they're struggling with this and this. And, we have had this situation going on, but I really wouldn't expect them to be affected by that, or it didn't seem like, that should be really what's causing their, issues. And sometimes there's just this confusion for us as parents of connecting what we see them going through and struggling with to what we think it may or may not be connected to. So I want to encourage you to just see it as kids are very perceptive and they're very intuitive. They pick up on everything. So even I have a lot of parents who will say to me, we make sure to never fight in front of our kids, or I make sure to never cry in front of my kid, or, whatever. And while sometimes those things can be helpful, and sometimes we actually need to do some of those things, what's important to remember is that kids are still picking up a lot of what is going on around them in their environment, whether they're directly being talked to about those things or not. So it's important to just have it in your mind that they're probably aware on some level, whether they even know how to connect the dots to those things or not, whether they're aware, you are aware on some level that they are being affected by the things that are going on around them. Even if it's things that only you know about and you feel as a parent, or between you and your spouse, chances are they're even still picking up on some just residual feelings or emotions about that, and then they're processing their own feelings about that as well. So just a really important thing for us to keep in mind as a parent, and especially when we're talking to them, we want to make sure that we're acknowledging and validating what they're feeling. Those are two huge important pieces of helping kids work through their emotions. Is first of all, acknowledging that they have them and validating them by making it okay that they're feeling that way or that they're affected by something. Validating doesn't always mean that you're agreeing or that you're not shaping or changing, the narrative or how you're talking about things, but validating simply means I hear you, I see you, I understand that you're having these feelings, and I'm going to sit here with you in them, and we're going to talk about it together, and we're going to work through this together. So it's really important that you not blow off or minimize what they're feeling. That's probably one of the worst things that we can do as parents when it comes to addressing our kids' emotions, is acting like it's no big deal what they feel, making them feel small or ridiculous for feeling that, even if it feels like that to us in the moment, because sometimes it does. Kids have very big emotions and sometimes not as much logic attached to them, especially, when it comes to teenagers. There's a lot of hormones going on. There's a lot of really big emotions. They're dealing with some pretty significant identity crisis moments. They're dealing with a lot of emotions that honestly can change from one moment to the next. And sometimes as a parent, it can be hard to track with those things, but it's so important to have empathy and to, once again, validate what they're feeling and not minimize it or blow it off. They really need us in those moments to be able to hear them and listen to them and work through those things with them. If they don't think that you care about what they feel, then they aren't going to care what you have to say about it. So sometimes, as parents, it can be easy to skip right to solving the issue, fixing the problem, giving the advice, and that can be our go-to because we feel like that is the role that we play. But sometimes it's more important to just listen and to just offer empathy and be with them there in that moment. And so that's a great way. Just let them know that you care about their feelings. You care about their perspective. You're listening to them. And that will give you the ability to really speak into what they're feeling. And they're going to feel like you actually care. So then they'll respect your opinion and value what you have to say, because they're, first of all, going to feel understood. They're going to feel like you know where they're coming from and you understand. And so then they're going to be more open to receiving the solution or advice or the support, whatever it is that you're offering to them in that moment. So super important things. Next thing is about change. So change is super difficult for kids, really at all ages and as adults, right? Can I get an amen on that? But change is is hard for all of us. We're just not wired necessarily to handle it very well. Some of us handle it better than others, but change is hard. And kids are no different. Kids, teenagers, change is difficult, especially change that happens at developmental leaps. So we're going to talk about more about that in a second, or when they're transitioning from one major point of development to another. But change is hard because it disrupts connections. So kids, just like adults, learn different pathways for making connections and thriving in their environment, right? And so much of that has to do with connections. So connections at school or at church, with a sports team, whatever it is. We as humans are just wired for connection, and it's a huge part of how we thrive and survive in our environment. And kids and teenagers are the same. So change disrupts our connection. So that might be moving, that might be changing churches, that might be losing a friendship, that might be gaining a new one. Lots of things. Might be going through a pandemic and being shut in your house and not being able to go to school anymore. So it's hard because it disrupts our connections. Change also removes our structure and our routine, which are things that kids also very much need. Kids thrive off of routine and structure. And so when change comes in, it disrupts that, right? So especially now with what we're experiencing, we don't have a whole lot of routine and structure because school is happening at home. It's ending now. Now we're moving into summer, but we're, all still in our homes. It's just different. We have kind of no semblance of what normal life looks like right now, which is very disorienting. And especially for kids and teenagers who don't have a whole lot of say and don't have a whole lot of control in their day-to-day choices. So it can be especially frustrating for them because they've experienced all this change. They have no control over it. They have no, even smallest measure of their normal routine and structure to kind of give them bearings on their world and their environment. And then on top of all of that, they aren't able to really make choices or be able to control anything that's happening. So that's super disorienting and can be very frustrating, and it can be very stressful. And our kids are affected by that. I know even the first couple weeks of quarantine. So my 4-year-old usually goes to pre-K. He was in pre-K 3 this year and he loved it. He was just thriving socially and loved going to school every day. And then all of a sudden he was home every day. And we tried to explain to him, kind of what was going on. But, as much as he could understand in his 4-year-old brain. But it was interesting for me, just as his mom, to watch him kind of go through his own emotional process of that. And he'd have days where he'd just be super grumpy and where he would not really enjoy being around his younger brother, who he's now stuck with all the time. Or, just days where nothing really happened, but he was just so grumpy. And I had to realize, okay, this is probably what's going on. He's affected by it. But whereas me, as his mom, and he's 4, not really thinking that he's going to be affected by all of this as much as I saw it happening before my eyes. So I think that's a good example of, as his mom, I wasn't even prepared necessarily for the emotional impact that it was going to have on my 4-year-old, let alone, your older kids and teenagers and how they are experiencing all of this. So within that, they also, they're losing a sense of control. They also are losing feelings of competence and confidence. We also learn ways in our environment to support our self-esteem and learn what we're good at and how we feel good about ourselves. Maybe we see ourselves as a great soccer player and going to soccer practice and being able to do that well adds a lot to our confidence and our self-esteem. So all our normal pathways for our kids in doing that have been disrupted by this change as well. And once again, that's not just talking about pandemic, that's talking about all sorts of change. So if kids have learned these patterns of discovering their areas of competence and how they feel confident in themselves and who God's created them to be and their unique gifts and talents, when something comes and changes that, it disrupts that, and that can be an obstacle for emotionally working through things and can just trigger some some different emotions that might be difficult for them to experience and difficult for us to understand as parents as well. And like I was saying about the developmental leaps, so this is an important thing to think. And just from a psychology perspective, for example, this is one of the things I really love learning about, is development and different phases of development over time. And one of my favorite things to learn about when I was going through school, and even to use after that, has been Erik Erikson's 8 emotional dilemmas, or crises, some people call them. But it's basically the idea that from birth through adulthood, really his theory spans the entire lifespan, so even into old age, we have these crises throughout our lives that we have to, or conflicts that we have to resolve, that really determine and shape our personality. And not only that, but how we resolve and determine one conflict affects the next one that we go into as well. So it's really important when you are trying to help your kids manage their emotions, is also just to look at the stage of life that they're currently in and what phase of development they're in, and maybe which of these major conflicts or themes are they trying to work through and resolve, and how is that going to shape and affect how they're actually processing through those feelings. So for example, I think about, my husband as a youth pastor, we see this a lot, just being involved in youth ministry. When kids are in high school, it's a lot about their identity. So they are figuring out who they are. They're figuring out what they believe, what they think. They're figuring out who they are, beginning to be separate from their families, just as individual humans themselves. And so it's a major identity crisis that they go through. And we all know high school is not the easiest time necessarily. There's a lot of pressure, a lot of uncertainty. There's been many times where I've thought about my high school self and wish I could go back and tell her some things and boost her confidence. But I also realized that it was going through those experiences that helped shape who I am today. So without those things, I wouldn't be where I am now. And that's exactly what this theory is kind of talking about, that as we reach these crucial conflicts in our life, how we work through and resolve them affects and shapes our personality, our belief system, so many of those things. So I would encourage you, I could do a whole different talk on those things. I'm not going to get into this in super detail, but I would encourage you as a parent to maybe look that up, or just to look a little bit into different stages of development. And so much can even be said for the cognitive ability or different capacities that develop as kids grow and mature and develop. So for instance, the ability to have abstract thought and to function from a basis of logic and reason doesn't even really develop until middle school and beyond that. So that's why it's hard, there's not a whole lot of logical parenting that goes on with my 2.5-year-old. It's very emotional at that stage. And so I have to learn how to help him self-regulate and manage his emotions by not going, it doesn't make any sense for you to keep doing this over and over. I wish sometimes that would work. That would be very helpful. But he hasn't, at 2.5, has not developed the ability to think with logic and with reason. And so it really helps to know which stage your kids are in, to know what things they have developed and what things they haven't. And it really can help shape your approach as a parent to how you help them manage their emotions during that time. And recognizing that if trauma happens, or major change, or a disruption of all their normal feelings happen in the middle of a transition from one phase to another, sometimes that can make working through things even harder, because they're already struggling with just the conflicts of development and making those leaps from one to the next. So if then something else piles on top of that, like a divorce, or moving across the country, or some significant change like that on top of what they're already trying to manage and what they're already struggling with, sometimes that can just magnify the emotions that are attached to that. So maybe if you're a parent of multiple children, and you've seen them go through phases and one handled it much better than the other one. Sometimes that's personality too, and just, kids are different and they all approach things differently. But maybe asking yourself too, well, okay, when this family event happened or this person passed away in our family, or, whatever it was, what was so and so going through at this time? Were they making one of those developmental leaps? And maybe that's why it's been harder for them to overcome this, or versus their brother or their sister that was at this different stage, or maybe a little bit older, and they were able to manage that and work through that a lot easier. It can just be a really helpful tool to look at their stage of development, and see what other things are at play and what other tools they may or may not have in order to manage their own emotions, and how we can help them as parents. It's also really important to remember that emotions have energy. And it's important for kids to express emotions physically. So this is not always something I think that we think about in terms of emotion. I think that this sometimes is surprising to people, even though we feel this as adults. Like, our emotions have energy as well. But we are much better trained and well-versed at managing those within our physical bodies. And we have different avenues for emotionally releasing, whether that's talking to somebody, or we go and work out, or we just know, even if we're not connecting the dots specifically like that in our minds, we have better ways of coping. We've just learned over time. So kids don't have that same experience yet because they're literally in the midst of learning that. So this is something that can be really helpful to us as parents or other caring adults in kids' life, is to remember that their emotions have energy, and that energy has to go somewhere. And so sometimes it can be really helpful for us to give them some kind of physical outlet for that emotion. So, like, for instance, okay, so for a good chunk of the last practice that I was at, I ended up seeing a lot of like 9 to 11-year-old boys. A lot of my caseload ended up being 9 to 11-year-old boys, and a lot of them were having behavioral issues at school. Some of them were getting suspended, some aggressive behaviors and things like that. I just kind of ended up having several clients with those kind of similar issues. And one of the main things that we did was we worked on outlets for their anger, because really what was happening was they were experiencing anger but not having a healthy way of coping with that or expressing it, and it would turn into aggression, sometimes even hurting other kids, or just being very extreme in different ways that they were expressing that. And so it became very clear to me that they just needed somewhere for that emotion to go that wasn't going to be destructive or harmful for them or for other people. And so immediately, that's one of the first things that we would start incorporating, was just working on coping skills when they would feel that anger rising in them. So it can be anything as simple as taking deep breaths when you feel that anger beginning to rise, taking deep breaths, counting to 10. But other times it would be things like going outside and kicking a soccer ball against the wall, or having a designated pillow in your room that you go in and punch and scream into when you're feeling angry. I've had older clients that have used a sledgehammer on a big tire and have hit that. I had an adult client who had just a board with nails in his garage, and he would hammer them sometimes when he would feel angry as well. So those are all just really good examples, and you can kind of, whatever stage, and age that your child may be, thinking through what would be most helpful for them to be able to move that energy outward in a way that is constructive and not destructive to them. So once again, I have a 2.5-year-old and a 4-year-old toddlers, very emotionally based, basically have no ability to regulate their own emotions. And this is a huge thing that we have been working on in our family, because right now they take it out on each other, and it is like WWE, like all the time in the McDowell household. There's just always wrestling, and honestly, they don't know that line yet either of like what's wrestling and having fun and what's actually hurting each other. So we have to step in a lot of times, but especially my 4-year-old has been working with different ways he can cope and let his anger out. So we have been talking about that. We have been utilizing some of those skills, and he doesn't get it right every time. But I have definitely seen him improve in terms of in the moment he feels this anger and he remembers, okay, I can't hurt my little brother when I feel this way. I'm gonna, go throw this pillow on the ground, or one of the things that we've talked about. So, however that translates into whatever emotion your child is struggling with, think about a physical activity that could go alongside that can help them cope with and manage that emotion. So also anxiety is something I seen a lot in kids in my practice. I would say that girls typically are more prone to experiencing anxiety issues. So things like coloring, embroidery, like stitching, things that are small repetitive motions can really be very calming and grounding and have that effect. So it works with every emotion. So what can help them move that emotion in a healthy and positive way that is not destructive? So things like anger can be outwardly destructive, but things like sadness and depression and anxiety can be very inwardly destructive as well. So thinking about how they can move the energy associated with that emotion in a way that is healthy for them to do. So those are some important things and just kind of some big ideas that no matter what age of development your child is at, no matter what emotion it is that they're dealing with, just some different tips for how we can think about those things, how we can approach them, some practical ways to help them work through and manage those things as well. That'll be really important. So quickly too, before I invite Pastor John on to share some of his personal experience, I want to talk about just a few do's and don'ts as parents in helping your kids manage their emotions. So starting with the do's. So do talk to them about emotions regularly. So make emotions a regular part of conversation. And this is something that I would encourage dads especially to listen to, and especially with your sons. Because there's a little bit more of a stigma with boys experiencing emotion, it's important that they know it's okay to feel emotion and how to express those and manage them. So a great way to do this would be sharing highs and lows at the dinner table. So the highest part of your day, what's the best thing that happened, and what was something that was difficult? What was maybe the lowest part of your day? And using emotional words. This doesn't mean that you have to feel everything and like pass a feeling stick to each other. That might work and you might do that. But it just means that you're touching on those emotional things and you're creating a culture in your family that it's okay to have emotions, it's okay to express emotions, and it's okay to work through them together. So talk about emotions regularly. Prioritize quality one-on-one time. I cannot stress this enough, but your kids need quality time with you. It doesn't mean that you have to have some huge extravagant plan. It just means that you need to be intentional about having face-to-face time with them where they have your undivided attention. You're not busy on your phone, you're not working, whatever it is. One of the things that I've noticed just in some of the best father-daughter relationships, mother-son, whatever direction, just parents with their kids, some of the best relationships that I've seen that I've wanted to incorporate just with my own kids, I've noticed a common theme of just that intentional one-on-one time. And usually there are weekly date times. So I think about even my counseling mentor was just one of the best men I ever knew. He's just so wise, and he was a pastor and he loved the Lord, and just had a great relationship with his daughter, and they had weekly date nights. And all the way through, her adulthood, throughout her childhood and through adulthood. And he unfortunately passed away from cancer. And I'm sure he would still be doing that to this day if he was here. But I always loved just seeing the bond that they had. And I knew it had so much to do with just the intentional time that he took to spend with her and invest in her. And so I love that. I was thinking about, this point too, and thinking about, so with your phone, right? Your iPhone, whatever kind of phone you have, if it starts glitching, which it often does, right? Half the screen doesn't show up, or it gets frozen on an app that's open, or whatever it might be. What's our first thing that we do to fix the issue? We turn it off, right? And back on. We reset it. That's exactly what quality one-on-one time with your kids does. It's like a reset for them emotionally. It's letting them know, I'm here for you. I'm with you. You're not alone in this. And there's so much emotional issues that can be solved just by having some good, consistent quality one-on-one time with your kids. So I want to encourage you, if they've had some new emotional issues that have popped up, think about, am I spending good quality time with them? Is it consistent? Am I being intentional about conversations I'm having with them? Do we share a hobby together? Do I need to incorporate that? Think about the one-on-one time that you may or may not be spending with them, and use that as kind of a first step in helping them to open up about their emotions, connect with you. There's just so much good that can happen with that, and kids just need that so much. And can I tell you, parents of teenagers, even if your teenagers say that they don't want that, they do. They absolutely do. Even if they wouldn't admit it, even if they don't realize it, they need you as their parents to spend time with them and quality one-on-one time with them. They absolutely need that. Do create structure and routine. So like we were talking about earlier, kids thrive off of structure and routine. Right now it's a little bit difficult to incorporate that, but there's still things that you can do. There's still, blocks of times you can fit in to do certain things. You can take a family walk every Thursday afternoon. You can do a family movie night every Friday night and order pizza, and each kid takes a turn picking a movie. Whatever it is, just create some structure and routine, and that gives them a better sense of what to expect, how to manage their emotions and their thinking and their perspective throughout the week. Right along with that too, give them choice and control. So obviously there's not a whole lot that they can have choice and control in right now, and even as kids, sometimes they don't have a whole lot of control in the choices that they make. But figure out, get creative in knowing how you can incorporate that in their lives. So once again, my kids are really little, but they even need this at their stage. So I've noticed, that some of their tantrums and meltdowns often come from when they feel like they don't have a choice. So my husband and I have tried to get creative in figuring out, we're like, okay, we need to get in the car. We're going somewhere. So I would like for you to go choose your outfit, or you have the choice between this pair of shoes and this pair of shoes. Pick whichever ones you want, put them on. The way less of a fight when we do that, then I'm just like, you're wearing these shoes and that's what's happening, because they need to have that sense of control over some choices as well. So they may not be able to do that a lot in their life, but get creative. And when it comes to even the small moments of each day, how can you incorporate choice that makes them feel a little bit more in control, which honestly helps them and it helps you as a parent avoid some of the struggle. This is especially a great tip if you're having a hard time with kids who aren't doing daily chores or even daily hygiene. That is honestly something that has been a frustration of a lot of the parents that have come into my office. She gives me such a fight when I try to get her to take a shower every day, or for him to brush his teeth every day. We gotta take care of our teeth. Why won't they get this? So even getting creative, and I heard a parent once say that they had the biggest struggle with getting their kid to go to bed. It was like a fight every night. And so they gave their kid the option, okay, between 7:30 and 8:30, you need to be in bed. I don't care when it is during that time, but by 8:30, you need to be in bed. And they kind of gave the choice there. And it really worked to solve a lot of the issue and the struggle, because they were able to pick, okay, well, I can go to bed at 8, and that's my choice of going to bed. It seems almost silly or trivial, but I'm telling you, it works if you can figure out a way to give them some control. Get creative in approaching your kids emotionally. If your kids have a hard time expressing emotions, or you're having a hard time knowing how to connect with them, get creative. Look up ideas, different places. Some of the ones that I've seen and used over the years as well, a thoughts jar. So this is really a great one for teenagers because they are a little bit more verbal in their thoughts and their feelings, but have a jar that maybe they're putting thoughts into, especially if they're worried about something or have more of a focused emotional issue that they're experiencing. Have them write down just different thoughts and feelings that they have about that and put it in the jar, and then have a weekly time maybe where you pull out those things and talk about them together. Also, I've seen families utilize family journals before, and this be a really effective method for talking about emotions, where basically they have like a designated spot that's like a signal that, hey, I've written something in the journal. I want you to read it and respond to it. And then I'll put it back in the spot and then I'll know you've responded to it. So sometimes it's easier to express emotions if it's not face to face. Sometimes just some emotions are a little bit more difficult to express. And so sometimes that can be a really effective way. But get creative. Go on walks, create the space that they might need to open up, give them the time that they might need to open up, get creative. And the last do I would say is model self-regulation. So show your own emotion. Once again, I feel like I hear this so much from parents, like, oh, well, we're very careful not to fight in front of our kids, or I make sure to let them know that their words don't affect me, that they don't make me cry, and then I lock myself in my bedroom and cry because of the nasty things that they said, or whatever. But it's so important as a parent to show your emotion, and to an extent, not that you're falling apart or you're having some big knockout drag out fight with your spouse in front of them. No, definitely use reason within that, and it's to an extent. You also should not be expressing a lot of emotion that is not appropriate for them to experience either. But it's important as a parent to model your own feelings. So they're going to learn conflict resolution by seeing and watching you have conflict and working through that. They're going to learn how to handle and how to cope with their anger by watching you get angry and manage it and work through it. They're going to learn how to overcome sadness. They're going to learn how to choose joy by watching you do it. So don't be afraid to show your kids emotion, because that is what is really teaching them. They're going to absorb so much more of what they see you doing than what they even really hear you saying or directly teaching to them. So that's just an encouragement as well to check in with yourself. How are you doing managing your emotions? Maybe you need to work on some of that. Maybe you guys can incorporate, some skills together. Even my 4-year-old, as we have worked on anger with him, I have used some of those same techniques. Have you ever heard of mommy timeouts? We use those in our house. Sometimes mommy needs a timeout and I just need to separate myself, breathe for a second because my blood pressure is rising, and whatever it is. So it's a good opportunity to just kind of check in and see how you're doing with that. So a few don'ts quickly, and then we're going to have Pastor John join us and share some of his experience. But a couple don'ts. Do not minimize or disregard. We already really talked about that. Don't blow off what they're feeling. Don't ignore them. Definitely one of the worst things that you can do, because it basically tells your kids, I don't care about what you feel, or what you feel doesn't matter. And that's a horrible thing for them to internalize. So don't ignore. Sometimes we don't always have the time at the moment, or kids don't always have the greatest ability to know what the great timing is to express certain things. So maybe even saying, I hear you. I want to be able to think about that for a moment, or I hear you, right in the middle of this happening. Can we talk after dinner tonight? That's fine. It doesn't always have to be right in that moment. Sometimes it's better for us to process for a minute, to be able to respond with the right tone, with empathy, and with love. So it's okay to let them know, but let them know that you will talk about those things. Don't forget boundaries. Boundaries, I just can't stress this enough for your kids. Kids need boundaries. Teenagers need boundaries, and they really thrive off of them. They will push back against them like nothing else, but they need them. And sometimes that's hard for us as parents to remember and to enforce, especially if it's causing a lot of conflict. But kids really need boundaries, and especially I just really can't say that enough with teenagers. They need to know what the rules are. They need to know what the boundaries are, and they need to know what happens when boundaries are crossed. So very important. And really you're teaching them how to have boundaries in their life and their relationships beyond their home as well. It's a huge way of how we develop our kids. It's a huge way of how we teach them and prepare them for the world and for future relationships. Boundaries are so important in every aspect of life. And so give kids boundaries, because it really does help them, even if they act like they hate them and they're the worst thing in the world. But boundaries also communicate that you care. You care about what happens to them. You care about how they manage their energy. You care about just whatever aspects those boundaries are helping to keep in place and protect. So utilize boundaries. One, just a plug for a book, Dr. Henry Cloud and Dr. Townsend have some great books about boundaries. They have one literally called Boundaries, and it's an amazing book, but they also have lots of versions off of that as well. So boundaries for kids, boundaries in your marriage. They just talk so much about the importance of boundaries, what they are, how we should incorporate them. I highly recommend those books. So if that's something that you are just feel lost about, don't necessarily know what to do about that, or how to incorporate boundaries, I would really recommend reading those books. Don't give complete privacy. So I could probably do a whole separate talk about this as well, especially in this day and age. I hear so many parents talking about, well, it's their phone. Like I wanna protect their privacy, or whatever. Like kids do not need complete privacy. A measure of privacy is important. I think that's important to set up and to define in your relationship with your kids, but do not give them complete privacy. I can't tell you how many teenagers have sat on my couch in my office and have been so frustrated that their mom has to be friends with them on Snapchat in order to see what's going on, or has to be friends with them on whatever social media app, plug in whichever, and so mad. And I can always tell they're always thinking I'm going to take their side about that. But I'm like, you know what? Good. I'm glad your mom keeps an eye on your social media. I'm glad she knows what you're posting. I'm glad she knows who you're talking to, because that's important. There's so much danger that kids can get into when it comes to technology, to social media, and it's so important that you are regulating that as a parent and protecting them, because they don't know how to protect themselves from that yet. I've also had so many conversations with students about, well, I know how to keep myself safe. And then we would talk about things and come to find out that they have a completely inappropriate relationship with someone that they don't even know online. They don't know who they are. They've never met them, but they're in love with someone online. They don't know how to protect themselves because they have not learned those skills yet. And there are unfortunately a lot of predators in a lot of different forms that can come. And also just kids need time and space away from social media, and they're not good at giving that to themselves. So once again, that kind of touches back on boundaries, but give them boundaries with social media. Give them time where it's not a punishment or anything, but it's time where you can engage as a family, where they're not going to choose social media. They're not going to be in their room scrolling Instagram for hours and hours. They need time away from that, where what they're feeling is not always constantly connected to all the people that they're following, all the people that are following them, all the people that are weighing in on everything that they post. That can be really dangerous territory. So I'm not saying that you have to read every single thing your kid posts, or you have a nightly routine of checking through everything. There are some good resources about parent guidelines and stuff when it comes to that. So I encourage you to look those things up. But protect your kids. Don't give them complete privacy when it comes to those things, because they need you to protect them, especially teenagers, especially older teenagers. They still need that help in protecting themselves and learning good skills, learning good relationship skills, learning good emotional processing skills that they're just not going to get if they're left to make all of their own choices and all of that. Don't just be their friend, be their parent. They will have lots of friends that come and go throughout their life, but they will have one you as a parent, and they need that role desperately in their life. So don't be their friend first and foremost. Be their parent. That doesn't mean that you can't have a good relationship. It doesn't mean that you can't be friendly in your relationship. But make sure those roles are clear and distinct. And I think that there's opportunity, if you do that, to have a great friendship with your kids into adulthood. I would say I have a great friendship with my mom now. She's still my mom. She still balances that well. But she was always my mom first and foremost, and I needed her to be that. And same for my dad. He was my dad. And so your kids need you to be parents, not their friends. They're not your BFFs and whatever. You can have a great relationship with them and have so many good moments in your relationship and be friendly, but you need to keep those roles distinct as being their parent first and foremost. And then the last don't is kind of goes along with that as well. Don't confide in them about your emotional issues, even if they seem mature or able to handle it. I can't tell you how many times I've seen this as well. Adults sharing with their children way too much information. So I know it might be confusing that I said it's okay to show emotion, and it is, your day-to-day emotions. But when it comes to expressing deep fears that you have, or maybe you're a single parent that's dating and you're, talking about things that may not even be appropriate for your child, but just knowing where that line is of, am I using my child as my confidant, as my friend in terms of my emotional support? It really happens. It happens so much, and it can be really, really harmful to a child psychologically and emotionally to feel like they have to parent their parents. So that would be something I would encourage you to be very wary of, is making sure you have good friends, making sure you have people in your life that you can talk to as a parent, that you can be working through your own stuff with. Maybe you need to go to counseling. Maybe you need a safe place to be able to work through some things so that's not spilling over into your relationship with your children. And obviously this is something that probably comes into play a little bit more with older kids, older teenagers. But especially when it comes to, issues of separation or divorce, knowing how to not put your kid in the middle of that, or always bad talking your spouse, or, some of those things. There would be some examples of that. But hopefully that is helpful for you. Just some big ideas and some concepts about how to think about kids and their emotions, how to manage those things, and some practical ways to help them, some do's and don'ts. So for the very last portion of our talk today about kids and emotions, I would like to invite Pastor John on to join us to share some of his personal experience with these things. So let's go ahead and welcome him. All right. Well, I want to welcome Pastor John, or P. John as we call him. How are you doing today?
Hey, everyone. Hey, Elizabeth. It's so good to be on with you. Thanks for having me.
Yes, thanks so much for talking with us. I am excited today to kind of continue talking about kids and emotions. So obviously I've been talking about that a little bit, but I just think you have so much wisdom and such a great perspective to share as our next generation pastor. You've kind of worked with the different ages over the years, and you are a father as well. What ages are your girls right now?
Putting me on the spot. 8,
yes.
11, and 13, almost 14. So I have one going into middle school now. Our middle one, Isabella, and one going into high school, Brianna. That's super weird to say. And then crazy. Brooklyn, who is going into 3rd grade. So.
Yep. So even within your own children, you cover a lot of the phases of childhood and adolescence right there. Yep. So that's awesome. Good. Well, I'm excited to kind of continue this conversation of kids and emotions, and how we as parents and even youth leaders, church leaders, can kind of help them cope with different things that they might be feeling during these times, and even just normally as well. This isn't the only time that kids are struggling with things emotionally. And I think the more that we're aware of what they're going through, and the best tools to be able to approach them and help them, the better we're going to be able to help them and express care for them. So
absolutely
talk about that. So to get us started, let's just talk about, as the next gen pastor and father, like we were just talking about, kind of those 2 big roles in your life. What are some concerns that you have for kids and their emotions during this time?
Yeah, I think that's a great question. I think one of my greatest concerns is really for myself and for all the parents that are watching, because our kids are learning from us how to handle this time, how we handle stress, how we handle our emotions, right? They're reading us like a book. And maybe some of the behaviors and ways that they are coping is it's kind of like looking in a mirror. I don't know if you've ever felt that as a parent, Elizabeth, or for those of you who are watching, right? Like you watch your child doing something, you're like, no, please don't get that quality. Like, don't, please. Like, I want you to have certain qualities of my life and who I am, but not that one, right? And so I think we maybe some of the things that we're observing in our kids are a direct reflection, like looking in a mirror of how we handle it. And maybe some of our Not knowing how to handle them is really not knowing how to handle ourselves and our own emotions. So I think it's so important that we do this well. That's one of the things that Janet and I said coming into this, and please hear me. We have not done it perfect. It's maybe easy to look from the outside and think of every other parent as doing it 10 times better than you, but we have not done it perfect. I'm not trying to paint a picture of perfection at all, because that's not the case. If you hung out in our home, you'd see that. But I think our perspective going into the quarantine was that we want to make this one of the highlights of our girls' lives. So we are going to do everything in our power to help them to see this from a God's eye view as opposed to a human view. So we're not going to complain. We're not going to bemoan the situation and our leadership. We're not going to have negative news filling our home all the time. We're going to do our best not to be overly stressed and take it out on our kids. We're going to do our best to really present a picture of a godly perspective on this and see it as the best time of our lives. We want them to look back at the Corona time, and while maybe others are going, man, how was that for you? How did you survive it? That was crazy. And them look back and go, that was the best time of our lives. I don't know what you're talking about. That was incredible, right? And again, I think having that goal in mind really helps steer our days, right? If I'm going to do that, I have to show up as the best version of myself as a parent, which means I need to get my sleep. It means I need to make sure I'm eating properly and fueling my body properly, because when I eat like junk, garbage in, garbage out, good things don't come out of me. I need to make sure that I manage my stress well, that we're going outside and doing daily activity. All these things that you mentioned in your conversation with Pastor Kevin and Jolene, we are doing those. I'm spending time. I start my day in the Word, and I start my day on my knees, because I think we can all agree when I don't do that, I'm not showing up as the best version of myself, which means my kids are watching and learning from me, and the behaviors when they're acting out. I think it's a really good moment for me to go, how have I been responding, and what am I modeling and exempling for them? So my biggest concern, you asked, what is my concern for the kids? My concern for the kids is how they see their parents and their mom and dad. And guess what? I maybe this is going to shatter some people's perspective of us, but I've blown up at my kids. Just 2 nights ago, Bella was acting out and being sassy, like super sassy. And I, in my hurry to get them to bed on time, that was my win. And I was not patient, and I was not peaceful with Bella. And I definitely raised my voice, and I had to go to her that night as I was tucking her in and just apologize right away and say, Bella, Dad didn't handle his stress. It's been a little crazy. I've had a lot of meetings. It's not an excuse, but I took that out on you, and I'm sorry. And that was a model right there of apology, of owning my mistake and my stress and saying, hey, we all get this. Like, I'm not denying that I have stress. She's seen it, and she's hearing me process it, but then helping to process it in a proper way as opposed to a wrong way. So I think my greatest concern is how they see their parents, how we're doing. So
Yep. I think that's so good. And I think it's so good to kind of do those check-ins like you were talking about, because this is a very high stress time, and there's a lot of moving parts. School just finished for a lot of people, thankfully, but, trying to figure out how to do Zoom school meetings. And even my 4-year-old has had Zoom like meetings with his class. And so trying to figure out those on top of getting everyone fed and making sure, it's just weird times, and it's weird for everybody. And I think it's easy to just get caught up in the stress of everything going on and let that kind of, carry you through the day. But if you can just stop and kind of collect yourself and just do a little check-in of, hey, how am I doing? How am I handling this? Like, okay, maybe I didn't handle that great, but what can I do about it now? Not wallowing that, not being defeated by that, because we're not going to do it well all of the time. And stress is particularly, like we talked about in that first week, stress particularly does not bring out the best in us. So usually it's not the best version of us that comes out. So during times of high stress, we're going to be struggling with that, even more. And what you were talking about made me think of John Acuff is one of my favorite people to follow just on Instagram.
Love him. Yeah.
He's the author and a speaker and a comedian, and he's just really great. But I remember seeing a post that he made. It made such an impression on me about a parent, and he was talking about how kids do often reflect our negative quality as a parent, and when we see those kind of manifest in them, we're tempted to discipline those things out of them. When we see like our negative selves reflected in them, we're tempted to want to discipline those things out of them. But what we really need to do is look inward, right? And to go, okay, ooh, that was not super pleasant to see, because it is like looking in a mirror. So what can I do about that? And once again, not being defeated by it, because we're all going to make mistakes. And like Pastor John was just talking about, those moments where we fail can really be some of the greatest lessons that we end up teaching our kids, and they can lead to some of our greatest successes as a parent. So we need to not be afraid of those things or defeated by them. But I think it is a great opportunity for us to look inward and go, okay, I'm letting stress get the best of me quite a bit, this last week. So how can I turn that around? How can I take better care of myself spiritually, physically, mentally, so that I am my best self for my kids, because they need that, and I am modeling these things, and I am their example, during these times. And they really are looking to us during these times when they feel uncertain or afraid, in their emotions. They're looking at us to how to handle that, so I think it's a great opportunity to kind of have those check-ins. So
yeah, absolutely. Great. And I love what you said, Elizabeth, with just giving yourself grace. Don't put so much pressure on yourself when you do fail, because you will. Yeah. And don't load yourself down with guilt and shame. Own it, learn from it, evaluate, like, how did I do? Like, one of the things I've been learning lately is to give myself a grade as to how I'm showing up as a husband and as a dad, and being engaged, and just being super honest, not negative, but honest. Like, did I show up well? Was I engaged as a father? Did we make the most of a stressful situation? I had to give myself not a great grade when it came to how I handled Bella, but I learned from that. Like, okay, so I gave myself a 4, right? But what do I need to do tomorrow night to show up as a 10? And so not dwelling on that, but showing up in a better way, learning from it. So I just think that's so important, to give yourself grace and to learn from yourself, from your mistake.
So good. So good. I love that. And sorry, I have to stop for a second, because Sam got a call, and I'm on his computer, and you're still here. Like, I can hear you, but I can't see you, and I don't know how to get back to our screen.
Oh no, bummer.
But the meeting hasn't ended, so that's good.
Yeah. Do we need to re-record that, or just?
No, I think it's still okay. I think it's because we're still going. So I just don't know where it went. Oh, there we go. Found you. Okay. Awesome. So that's all good. I might have just looked distracted during that, but I think it's fine. Okay, cool. Do you feel like you finished your thoughts okay on that one?
Yep.
Okay, cool. Awesome. I think that's really great wisdom. That's good. So I know something that we think about as a church a lot as well is kind of big milestone moments. And that's kind of a little bit of behind the scenes, how we plan out just events throughout the year. And we're always thinking about those big milestone moments for kids and teenagers. And so in terms of that, obviously, kids are not experiencing the same things, missing out on a lot of those big milestone moments. So what are some things when it comes to milestones that we can be aware of, and how kids are missing out of that because of this pandemic, and how that might be affecting them?
That's such a great question. I think it's pertinent to all of us, relevant to all of our situations, because we're missing out on a lot of stuff, right?
Right.
And you referenced, Elizabeth, the milestones. For those of you who aren't familiar with Journey's milestones, you can go to jrnyparent.com, and we have those. There's a tab that says milestones at the top, and you can go and see those laid out. But they're really spiritual celebrations for our kids. Right? We celebrate a lot of things as parents when it comes to our kids. We celebrate their first steps. We celebrate, their little league, and they get, a medal if they win a championship, or we go to a sports banquet and do awards, or we celebrate graduation. We celebrate big moments in our kids' lives.
Right.
When they get their driver's license, maybe that's not a celebration. Maybe that's a scary thing. But spiritual moments I think are the eternal moments. Like those things are great. I'm all for celebrating them and celebrating our kids. But I think even more important than that is celebrating those spiritual moments for our kids. And so we've created 7 different milestones, spiritual milestones that we think are worth celebrating in the discipleship path of our children. They're not defining moments. They're not the only moments. They're just big moments that are worth celebrating. And we have set these up not for the church to celebrate them, although we help with that, but to set you as parents up for the win on the celebration. So for example, when your child gives their life to Jesus, that might happen at church. Even better, it would be awesome if it happened at home and you got to pray with them and lead them to Christ and celebrate that moment. Or when they get baptized, or as they graduate from 5th grade and go into 6th grade, we call that the bridge, or a purity commitment, or graduation going into from high school into college, right? We call that the launch. So we celebrate some of those moments as a church, even child dedications, right? These are all little spiritual milestones, but really it's about setting you as mom and dad up to be the spiritual leader of your home and to lead the way. And I think sometimes, Elizabeth, we can get caught in like dumping all that on the church. Like, I mean, I got a lot going on that just, I'm going to drop them off at kids, or I'm going to drop them off at youth. And like, you guys take care of their spiritual. I'll make sure they get fed and get all that stuff. And sometimes I don't even remember to do that. But like, if you take care of the spiritual stuff, like that would be great. Because we don't feel qualified, or maybe we didn't have our parents disciple us, right? There's a lot of reasons. We don't know what to say. And like, I don't know how to lead my child in a purity commitment. Like my mom I didn't even want my mom and dad to do that. Right. And so we don't know how, so we can leave that in the church's hands, but that's not who the Bible speaks to as the main spiritual discipler of our children. That's our job. That's my job. So while I do appreciate having someone walk alongside of me, like I have to take that ownership, and I need to take that leadership role. I'm speaking to some dads who are watching this right now. If you are a female watching this, you need to make sure you share this with your husband. But men, we have to step up and we need to lead the way, right? And so when it comes to this time, and I see COVID-19 as a gift, because it's time that we stop relying on the church and the church's events to disciple our kids. And this is a perfect time for us to go, hey, we didn't do the purity commitment services this year in student ministry. That was supposed to happen in April and May. That didn't happen. Right. Because of everything going on. Right. Graduations are not happening right now. But that doesn't have to be a bad thing. We just celebrated our daughter's birthday, and she said, this is the best birthday I've ever had, because we were committed to making it the best birthday she ever had. Right. And so you can still celebrate those milestones. Maybe you baptize your child and you're not waiting for the pastor to do it. You baptize them in your bathtub. I don't know, like, or in your pool. Like, you can make that a special, intimate moment with just you and them. You can do a special getaway with your son or your daughter and give them a purity ring and talk them through how important this commitment is. Maybe read a book or two with them. So I think, you've heard the phrase times call for desperate measures, right? I think these kind of times call for creative measures. Yes. I love that. There's a scripture in Romans 8 that I used to hate, actually, that says God works all things for the good of those who love him and who are called according to his purpose. That means he even works this quarantine time for our good. Absolutely. And so if God says that he's going to work it for good, I want to be a part of that. And I want to make sure that it is good. I want to make sure it's awesome. So baptism, salvation, your child moving into the next grade, maybe graduating from 5th grade into 6th grade, which we have one of those, right? Or a purity commitment or graduation. Get creative. Jump on Google if you're not a creative person and find other people who are creative, or Pinterest or whatever, and make it awesome. Be committed to making it the best time of their lives and leaning into this season as a gift instead of as a curse. So that's that's just my answer for that question. And I think it's something that we're trying to do our best to do. And I just want to say this too, Elizabeth,
Yeah.
If you're struggling with ideas or you need help, reach out to us. Reach out to our kids pastors,
Yep.
our youth pastors. Like, we would love to help you, brainstorm with you, get creative, resource you, whatever we can do to help you. I would love to help you, so that you can do this well. We want to set you up for the win. That's our goal.
Yes.
We win if you win.
Yep.
So let us know if you need help, and we would love to help.
Yes, absolutely. I think that is such great wisdom. And it's so true. There are a lot of resources out there. Like, you don't have to be the Pinterest mom or dad that knows how to make all the crafts and do all the lessons. And, like, you can find stuff that people are already using and tweak it to what works for you. And Pinterest really is a great resource. I will back you up on that too. Even as a therapist, moments where I felt stuck with clients or, kind of use things that I knew but weren't working so well, even just like looking some stuff up on Pinterest, I found some amazing things that I was able to incorporate into, future treatment and things like that. So there are such great things. And I love just the heart of what you're saying of it. It really, we can choose to see this as an opportunity to be intentional and creative with how we're connecting with our kids and turning something that could be just this crazy negative experience into some of the best family memories and moments that they'll remember forever. So I think
absolutely.
that's awesome. And I can even say, just sharing a personal example of that, our oldest son is just turned 4 in April. And so he's really at the age now where this past Easter, we really told him about like the Easter story. We've talked to him about it before, but it kind of just, in one ear and out the other most of the time. But this year, we were home for Easter, and it was such a bizarre experience for us, because I was a pastor's kid growing up, and then I was a youth leader, and then I married a pastor. So there has never been an Easter that I was home ever, before this. And because we were home, we did exactly that. We got creative. I knew we really wanted to talk with Caleb about the Easter story, and we found this really awesome kids video that was like 5 minutes long on YouTube, and he watched it and he was so into it the whole time. And then right when it was over, he wanted to watch it again. And so we did. And then we had a whole conversation about it. And then later that morning, while we were watching the kids church online, he ended up saying like the salvation prayer. And we had this.
Oh, come on. That's
cool,
awesome.
I was like bawling.
Yeah.
It was so sweet. And it was so special. It probably would not have happened like had we been at church. I would have been like, oh no, he learned, and we might have talked about the Bible lesson, for a few minutes and things like that. But it was such a sweet experience for us to have as a family, and I'm really thankful for that. Like, I think I'll always remember that moment.
Absolutely. Choosing to find the treasure within the trial.
Yes,
I think that's so important. What a gift.
Yes.
That you're going to look back on for forever and go, this was a great gift. That's awesome.
Yep. So I love that. That's really cool. It's really so much to do about perspective. So I would say a couple things just about kids and emotion, things that you have learned just over the years as a pastor, as a father, any nuggets of wisdom just that you have learned about helping kids and teenagers manage their emotions, maybe even something that you would say to your younger self as a youth pastor, as a father, just something that you could go back in time and maybe give those nuggets of wisdom.
Yeah, that is such an important question. Two nuggets of wisdom there. First one, I think it's so important that we take the time, or maybe a better way to say it, we make the time to connect with our kids. I know you talked a little bit about giving our kids a chance to talk about their highs and their lows. What's the best part of the day and the worst part of their day? That's how we ask it. Or something that made you sad, something that made you happy. And we will do that at the dinner table. I think family dinners are important, but something that Janet does so well that I have learned from her is that bedtime connection. When we lay down with them and we can talk and we're kind of, laying next to them, they don't have to look us in the eyes. It's less pressure. It's one-on-one time where they can process their day and just talk about what's gone on. And sometimes that's uneventful, but a lot of times they end up sharing things that are so special that I look back and go, God, help me not to, want to rush through this bedtime routine so that we can get into bed because we're exhausted, but like to enjoy it because one day we won't have this. So I think having the kind of relationship with our kids that allows them to share these things, asking really good questions and learning to ask it new and fresh ways where they can process their emotions and share about things that might have happened and how it's affected them. We've had to process some heavy stuff with Brianna, friends that she thought were friends that have not been kind and have been pretty brutal. And I wonder how she would be able to handle those if she wasn't able to use mom and dad as a sounding board. And first of all, that took trust, right? That's years and years and years of nightly conversations. We're not talking hours. We're talking a couple minutes every night. So you don't have to have hours as a parent. I think sometimes we leave those conversations when we have like hours to talk with our kids, and then our kids don't want to talk with us for hours. Well, I don't either want to talk for hours, but just like, can I just break it down and make it super practical and super simple? 5 minutes a night that you connect with each of your children. That 5 minutes a night when they're teenagers will mean that they want to talk with you. When they're teenagers, it's not going to be awkward for them because they've done it their whole lives. They enjoy talking to mom and dad. In fact, if I don't do this, the other night, Brianna said, Dad, you didn't come in and talk to me. You just gave me a kiss and prayed for me. Like, I want you to come hang out. Like, that meant something to me because she's a teenager.
Right. That's
not normal. Yeah. And so it's a tradition. It's what we do. She misses it if it doesn't happen. And so I think, again, for the parent that feels maybe insecure, or like they don't have that, or you haven't been doing that, just start with 5 minutes and do small talk. They're maybe not going to open up to you about all their emotions right away. Right. But as you create a safe place, I think that's so important as well. A safe place where you listen. And instead of like, I even, kind of can go into pastor mode sometimes, right? And it's like, you're not her pastor right now, you're her dad. Right. And so like, I want to teach her and disciple her. So just even learning that balance of, just being a really good listener and caring and feeling what she's feeling. And I would say another thing that so I mentioned I had 2 pieces of advice. The second one is, don't be the only person that they can go to that's safe, right? Okay. There's things that I didn't share with my parents when I was a teenager. It's not because my parents were bad. It wasn't because any other reason. That's just part of the way God's wired us. As we get older, the Bible even says that we begin to leave our father and mother and we cling to someone else, right? Like God's naturally wired us to begin to separate and spread our wings, because otherwise we'd be deadbeats living in our parents' basement until we're 77, like he's wired us that way. So we try and have a couple mentors in each of our kids' lives. And so I've mentioned this before on the weekends, but Brianna has 3 mentors in her life. We're so thankful for them. I mean, I can't even tell you. She was on with one of them the other night and I was teary-eyed. She has another safe place to go. There's probably things she shares with those older, godly, spiritual mentors that she hasn't shared with us. And I'm okay with that because I know they're reinforcing what we're teaching and they're giving her a safe place. And Bella has now asked, I mean, she's going into 6th grade. She's 11. When do I get to start picking my mentors? Which 6th grade is when we're doing it. We consider their small group leaders their mentors, but now she's going to start going and meeting with each of them about monthly. So that's why we try and have 2 or 3 in their lives so that they can have someone in their life that they can go and share or do coffee with, or what. They're not drinking coffee, but you get what I'm saying. Frappuccino with something. And and so we just pay those mentors in coffee. We just say, all right, if you don't mind taking Brianna out, we'll pay for it. And so it's just a way that we can say thanks. So those are a couple nuggets of wisdom for you that I think are just so important in helping kids process through their emotions and having a safe place to talk, because they need that. Otherwise, what's the other option? They bottle it up. That's not healthy. Right. So safe places. And sometimes if we notice that one of our kids is a little bit more emotional, or there's a moment where we noticed that Brianna was internalizing, we didn't know all that was going on. So we just tip that mentor off and say, hey, she seems to be holding on to something and we don't know what it is. We don't need to know what it is, but if you can kind of just dig in and ask some Holy Spirit led questions, we want her to be able to process that in a safe way. So. Right.
I love that. I think that is so important that you brought that up, because this is something I see a lot in counseling as well, because I've worked with teenagers probably mostly in my practice. And so an element of that is always working and talking with the parents as well. And so a lot of sessions are, you know, a good chunk with the teenager or the kid, whoever, and then a part with the parent. And a lot of times what would happen in talking with the parent, you know, if we would, you know, or bring the parents into a conversation we were having, you know, or something like that, there would almost be like a jealousy that would be expressed of like, well, I just don't understand why they're not talking to me about that, you know, or like or a frustration, like I must not be doing something right if they don't feel comfortable talking to me about that, or like almost I want to be that person that they talk to about all of those things. And while the heart and the intention of that is good, they need other people in their life to be able to support them. That's part of full development for them too, as well, just developmentally, psychologically, emotionally, in all aspects. They need a good assortment of mentors, caring people in their life that can help guide them and direct them, that can back you up as a parent, and the things and the values and the things that you're teaching them. So you want them to have those relationships in their life. And that is really what makes part of being a great parent, is recognizing that kids need more than just you, and that's okay. Like, you're doing your job right if they still need other people in their lives to help support you. And so you can help you can fulfill that role as an amazing parent in their life by bringing other resources into their life. So maybe that is counseling, maybe it's a mentor. You know, there's lots of different avenues for that. But if they can have someone that, as well, like Pastor John was saying, is a safe place for them to be able to talk about things, there just are going to be things that they're not going to want to talk to you about as a parent. And honestly, it might be not fun as a parent to talk to them about too. So it's good to have, you know, some people alongside you in that journey as well. So I love that idea, is just have people that you trust, that you're praying for, you're praying with, that can help come alongside of you and just helping your kids work through things. You are always going to be their primary support. You're always going to be, no one can ever replace mom and dad. You know, there's just, it's such a significant role. No one can ever take that place, but it is so helpful to have some other people just to be able to bounce ideas off of, to talk about some other things that are harder to talk to mom and dad about, you know. So I love that idea. And I love what you said about really just making investments of time in your kids, and that has such a huge payoff immediately and in the future as well. Just seeing them as opportunities to invest in your kids and in your relationship. And I can even think about, my mom did such a great job at that growing up. We didn't always have, you know, a perfect relationship, but she was always so available to me. You know, I think there's so much power in just being available as a parent. And, you know, I just think about that as I was growing up in my teenage years. She was a person I did go to and I talked to a lot about things, and I still do, because she's always available to me. She's never, you know, she always has time for me. She's always kind when we talk about things, open about things. She tells me things that I need to hear, you know, so, and it has a lot to do with just those investments over time. So I think that's such great wisdom. And just as a last question of the day, what's one thing that your family specifically that you feel like you guys are rocking at, doing really well, and just you feel like would be a great idea to share with other people to incorporate during this time?
Yeah, that's good. I think one of the things that has thrown me off, and probably a bunch of us off, is it can feel in moments like this like we've lost our purpose, right? Every human being has been hardwired by God with a purpose. He has a purpose and a plan for our lives. Even it says that in the scripture, I know the plans and the purposes that I have for your life, declares the Lord, right? So he set something aside for each of us to do. And when we're throwing off our rhythm, I mean, for me as a pastor, I'm not preaching as much. I'm a whole lot more Zoom calls for sure, right? Zoom fatigue is a real thing, but like,
yes, it is.
I definitely can feel like, you know, I'm wired to connect with people face to face. I'm wired to mentor and to coach. I'm wired to preach the gospel.
Yep.
And I haven't been doing that as much.
Yeah.
So I can feel thrown off of my purpose. And I think it's the same with our kids. If we don't have something constructive, something that's that we're those outlets, where we can begin living out our purpose. I've actually talked to quite a few people who have felt that same thing. And I think there's something about that. Yeah. So one of the things that we've tried to do, I don't know that it's always been intentionally, but it has before Corona time, right? But I would say during COVID-19, we're just, it's this season of quarantine. It's kind of just been like, you just do what you got to do. And again, we've been committed to making it fun and awesome and over the top and just them creating great memories. But I think more lately I've been desiring, and we've been doing it unintentionally. Now it's more intentional. And that's just this idea of tapping into each of our kids' creative purposes, right? Yeah. So for Brianna, she has a YouTube channel. So part of our conversations is how is she using that? And so because she feels like God's spoken to her about being a missionary, having conversations about how she can use her YouTube channel, not just for fun, but to be a missionary. Yeah. So she's reached out to friends of hers that and asked, what is one thing that God's teaching you? She asked them to record a video of what God's teaching them during the quarantine time. And then she put that together as a YouTube video. How awesome. And awesome. Her and Bella decided to do Sunday Devos. So they record every Sunday. They've done 2 now, so I guess it's not every Sunday, but for the last couple, they've done Sunday devotionals, and they share scriptures. So one of hers was scriptures that are helpful during COVID-19, and awesome. One of them is just, so that they have these Sunday Devos that they're recording. And so she's tapping into her purpose, right? Her God-given creativity and purpose. Bella loves TikTok videos. So she is. I have
so been enjoying the Brown family TikTok videos.
Oh man, fun. I'm telling you what, it has been a fun, creative outlet in our family. And I mean, she's coming into me, Dad, what's our next one? Like, we're doing it together. Well, now is that fully tapping into, her unique God-given purpose? I don't know what that fully is yet for Bella. Bella cares about people. Yeah. So there's some other things we've done with her. She's probably going to be a nurse or a teacher. I mean, we can just see that those innate qualities within her, right? But it's meant special time with just Bella and I brainstorming and looking through fun TikToks that we want to do. Yeah. And she loves it. It's time with Dad, right? Yeah. And it's memories that we'll forever have. So instead of her sitting in a room, on her iPad for endless hours, which is not good, right? We can still tend to rely on iPads to babysit our kids, especially when we're exhausted. Yep. Instead of her doing that, like giving her creative outlets, allowing her to exercise that God-given creativity. We've done blessing bombs on a bunch of friends' houses, and they will design cards and signs and posters and bake cookies, and we'll go and bless people. We try and bless people. We did a big creative night for Cinco de Mayo, right? And they decorated the house and did crafts. Like, they planned all of it. They did all, and they taught us instead of the parents teaching them. So I know that only works for our age kids. Probably it's not going to work for your age kids, but there's so many little things that we can do instead of moping and just sitting there in boredom. Like, that we can go. We've never celebrated Cinco de Mayo before, but we learned about it. Brianna taught all of us because she learned it in Spanish class. What is why do we celebrate Cinco de Mayo? What's the history? We learned about Mexican culture and why it's celebrated. It's so, we turned our backyard, our friend's backyard, into a lazy river. This is Sunday after the journey loop. And so little videos, little creative, fun adventures. We just want to turn everything into an adventure. And I will just tell you it this way. It's hard to be sad or to be emotional about what you're missing out on when you're not missing out on anything. When everything is fun and it's part. And again, you might not be the world's most creative person, or that might not be your flow. That's okay. I say steal everyone else's ideas then. Like, use their creativity and make it fun and make it a party. And you don't have to do one every day, but like, give your kids something to look forward to. So those are just a few things that I think that we're doing well. And I do believe that our kids will look back one day and say that was one of the greatest seasons of our life. And I think they're going to look back on it with joy. We can teach our kids, instead of me doing another sermon on choosing joy and choosing my attitude, you know, how I respond to situations, I want to show them.
Yep.
So showing them what choosing joy looks like,
Yeah.
choosing a positive attitude, choosing this is awesome attitude, because our situation doesn't dictate that. We dictate that. And we have a choice in it. Whatever is good and pure and lovely and of good report and praiseworthy, think on these things.
Yes.
So
good. And I think that's so good, because really what we have to keep in mind as parents too is what we teach our kids is so much more about what we show them than what we verbally teach to them anyways. You know, it's what culture are we creating in our family? What values are we living by every day? Those are going to be the things that stick with them and stay with them throughout their lives too. I think we just put so much pressure on ourselves as parents. And I know this is something that I can get caught up in a lot of times too, of like making sure I'm doing everything the right way. You know, like I remember when quarantine first started, I shared about this, you know, in our first video, I got so overwhelmed, like seeing all these parents of like other preschoolers who had these like daily schedules, and they had like time of learning letters and like doing all this stuff. And I was like, oh my gosh, I'm not doing any of this right, you know, and I just put so much pressure on myself that I had to be like, you know, almost like making these marks each day to feel like I was succeeding or doing well as a parent. And I just had to like let that go, because first of all, my kids are 4, 2, and not even a year old, and they're going to be fine if they don't know their letters by the end of quarantine. You know, they're going to be okay. But it helped me adjust to go, okay, this is what I'm seeing, and that's good for everybody else, but like what's good for me, and how can I make things intentional for my family and with my children? And I think we have to keep in mind that making memories with them, a lot of times that is the goal. You know,
that's
like
the goal.
That's where we're winning. That's where, you know, because it is the things that stick with them. It's the things that really instill those values that we're trying to teach. Like you said, even just a positive attitude. Like, are they going to remember that more from going, all right, remember, we always have to have a positive attitude? Or is that going to stick with them after time, seeing when we are faced with a challenge or a hardship and having a good attitude and adjusting our perspective and switching those things and making, you know, having a fun moment out of something that could otherwise be dreary or, you know, boring or something like that. So I think that's so awesome. And honestly, I feel like kind of the theme of this talk and conversation has so much to do about just shifting your perspective to see these times and these moments during this pandemic, but beyond, as intentional times that we can connect with our kids, we can invest in them, and kind of by default, that helps the other things that come with their emotion. And, you know, if we're taking the time to make those investments, when those hard times come, we're going to have already done the work that helps us walk through those times as well.
Yeah, that's so good. It's like a bank deposit, right?
Yes.
If we're depositing into them through the joyful experiences and the nightly conversations, then when a stressful time comes, they actually have something to draw on, right? It's not a bankrupt account. It's something that they can draw on, a relationship and the memories, and you don't feel bankrupt and you don't respond in a bankrupt kind of a way. So that's so good.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much. That was the questions I had for you. Anything else that you were thinking about that came to mind as we were talking?
No, I just want to encourage parents that you're doing better than you think you are. I want to just say, you matter in your kids' lives. You matter more than you think you do, and you're doing better than you think you're doing. And just want you to know that we're praying for you, that we're for you, that we are on your team, and that you're not alone. So don't try and do it alone. Reach out. We're for you, and we'd love to be a part in any way that we can to just help encourage you or pray for you or help you go to the next level. So keep doing what you're doing. Keep showing up like you're showing up. You're awesome, and we're thankful for you.
Yes, agree. I received that as a parent too. So thank you so much. Thanks so much for joining me today and talking through all this. I think we talked about some really awesome stuff, and I'm excited for parents to be encouraged by this. So I appreciate your time.
Yeah, thank you. Thanks for having me.
Yep. And thank you everyone for tuning in and joining us. Make sure you catch us next week for a mental health moment, as I am talking with Will Hutcherson, and we're talking about suicide and despair and how to work through that, how to reach out if you're struggling with those things, and also how to reach out to the people that you care about and love as well. So thanks for joining us. Tune in next week.